So the Boss ME90 got announced slash released a couple weeks ago, and a few friends of mine, they know I'm a big fan of one of the previous ME versions, the ME70, and they asked me if I was gonna, chuck my old one and go and get the new one. And I have to say though, even though my ME70 came out in 2009, it's not really that long in the tooth, and I figure I'd do a quick video on the Boss ME series and kind of give you guys a little bit of a overview of what these later ME units have to offer, as opposed to the new hotness that Boss has just announced. And this is a typical YouTuber plug. I'll do it early. If you like this channel, hit the subscribe button. The bell icon will let you know when I put up a new video. I've got over 97% of the viewers on this page aren't subscribers. If I don't know if I'm showing up in your feeds because just how the YouTube algorithm is going. But if you hit the subscribe button, you are sure not to miss any of my future videos. And if you like this video, click the thumbs up button. And if you want to share it, there is also a button for that. Anyways, back to the Boss ME series. And they've been out since like the 80s-ish. They've always been a few steps behind the flagship models that Roland and Boss offered up for guitar players when it came to multi-effects units. Initially, the ME5 was a pretty decent contender as far as a floor-based multi-effect systems. But as the years went by, the ME series were kind of adapted and kind of marketed to players that were just getting into multi-effects devices, and they were meant to be relatively inexpensive. And the way Boss usually cut corners, that usually meant with things like plastic enclosures and very simplified interfaces with not a lot of buttons, a lot of arrow keys and cursor keys that would turn things on and off as you would scroll through a menu. The sounds were pretty decent out of the box, and it overall had the vibe of hardwired Boss stomp boxes. In fact, that's a lot of it had that's what a lot of their marketing materials were meant. There was basically a lot of Boss's favorite stomp boxes in one box. But with this ME series, you were always able to make a sound, you could save it, and then recall it. Things like MIDI sometimes usually weren't offered because that's kind of wasted for certain players at that level that are just getting into multi-effect systems. Now, in 2006, the Boss ME50 came out, and that took things in a whole new step. First of all, it had a metal enclosure, and it had an interface that offered up stomp box like knob controls and selectability. It also still had the ability to save combinations of settings for recall later on, like you would have for other multi-effects devices. And I had heard there were a lot of professional players out there that were kind of like sidemen for singer-songwriters. They grabbed those type of, they grabbed a lot of the ME50s for things like, jamming on the bus to learn songs or things like that, for their own personal practice in a hotel room. And a few of them I've heard stories of where, just out of logistics, they ended up in an airport and had to all of a sudden fly to New York or fly to Los Angeles to do a late night talk show, and the only thing they had on them was a Boss ME50, and they had no problem. They said, sure, I can do the gig with what I have, because we're only going to play one or two songs, and they're usually hits, and the hits have pretty straightforward effects. There's nothing out of the ordinary, and they were able to just walk on stage with a rented amp with whatever guitar they had, and they were able to, and also the fact they were professional players, were able to bang it out with no problems. And it fit, easily in a carry-on, with their clothes. So it's a very easy thing to move around. And this is when pedal boards were kind of starting to get big. And this kind of fit the bill between like an analog pedal board and a modeling system kind of in one, but it was a lot smaller and a lot cheaper. Now, the ME70 came out in 2009, and it expanded things a bit further with another foot switch, and they had some more options like some preamp models in there as well too, and they broke out the effects section to be a little bit more advanced as well. And I knew a few guys that grabbed these for home use, back in the day when they had come out, and I still think they're great for headphone practice and home recording in that sense as well. They added in it's a pretty simple amp and cab sim. It's baked into the unit, and when it's used for recording and headphone use, like I said, it pairs nicely, especially when you're using the amp, the preamp section of that. It works very well with that as one unit. Boss multi-effects units always did great sounds that were clean wonderfully, and the heavy rock and metal tones were always, again, something very easy to dial in. The big area a lot of those units, those multi-effects units were lacking, were kind of getting those in between crunch sounds that didn't sound really synthetic, like trying to nail like things like Vox and Fender Tweedy type stuff. It always seemed kind of lacking, especially when they would show you a preset version. But by this point on the ME70, they kind of had that sorted out, and it's a little bit of a tweak to kind of get there. You have to back off on a few things and really play with the EQ, but with a little bit of listening and a little bit of extra work, you can really do it. I've been using my ME70 for my cover band since 2017, and it's still impressive. And I'm covering everything from Dua Lipa to Neil Young, and I've had no problems and no roadblocks in trying to get the sounds I need. Now, in 2014, Boss released the next version, which is the ME80, and expanded things even further with some more foot switches. They broke out the effects section even further for more adjustability. And Boss added in a USB connection that meant you could now edit patches on a computer and with their own software, and you could save and archive them. So the jump was kind of worth it, where you got that next level of tweakability. Now, the downside that I see from things like that is the switches were a little bit more plasticky, and the expression pedal was also not a metal version, which was like the ME70 had. It's another plastic type of thing, but they seem pretty roadworthy for considering they're not going to be getting abused by players as far as that goes. A smart player is not going to beat on the thing, and that it makes sense to have those things. If you're going to expand it one way, there's always going to be a downside, and that seems to be the one downgrade from the ME70. Now, as we said, the ME90 was announced a few weeks ago, and the format kind of stays the same as the ME80, but again, it's a bit more expanded. There's more amp models, and they've updated the effects system, as 9 years have passed since the ME80 came out, and these updates are a lot more contemporary to what you'd find in Boss's higher priced series of multi-effects systems, as well as the general platform of effects that has come through in the last 9 years have been added in there as well. And Boss has also seemed to retire their COSM, their composite object sound modeling term that they've been using as their name for their audio design platform since like the mid to late 90s, because they now have their AIRD, AIRD, I think that's what we call it. It says Augmented Impulse Response Dynamics, and that's kind of running in their GT and GX series of multi-effects devices. But unlike those series of units, the ME90 still maintains no screen interface. It's still all knob based. However, there is a Bluetooth module that you can plug in that will allow for wireless editing on an iOS or an Android device. And this same Bluetooth feature can also allow you to pipe in external music from other devices, like the way like an aux input would normally do. So if you have to have backing tracks go through it, you can still do that through the actual floorboard, but you don't have to have wires and cables going through. So that's kind of a cool thing. And they've really gone into that really nicely. And this is just an overview as far as that goes, is they've really gotten into that. I'm very interested in this. I'm sure a deep dive would go into some really great nuances of what the performance that this brings to it, which is really cool. There's also an external loop on the ME90, meaning if you have like a boutique pedal, like something really special that you can't part with, whether it's like some sort of fuzz or some sort of overdrive, that can also be patched in, and it's selectable as to where you're going to put it in the signal chain before, after. And that's kind of cool. So if you have like maybe one, or you could actually kind of have like a series of effects. Maybe you want to use that the ME90 with a bunch of other analog pedals and be able to patch things in as you go. That's kind of cool. You can almost have it work like almost like an ME90 for all the kind of really complicated and maybe calling up certain patches and things like delays and reverbs have to be specific for songs. And if you just want to have like overdrives and a couple overdrive pedals and maybe something that's like a boost or something, you can have that separate and have that where it goes in the chain. So it kind of gives you some options there. And there's also something here that's really cool because they can actually add in 3 impulse responses that you can put in there. And this is kind of a game changer because this is hot on the heels of like the GT or the GX units. And now you can really get that sound from things that you normally wouldn't get out of a unit this size or at this price. So especially when you can get if you have your own IRs that you've developed yourself, or you've purchased ones from companies like Celestion or something like that, or maybe there's some YouTuber that offers them for for a package deal from their Patreon or whatever. You can buy those and load those in. You can actually get some really great sounding IRs already into the unit, and it's not like the ME70 or the ME80 where there's no tweakability to that amp and cab sim. It's kind of baked in there. So you really do get that extra tweakability. And it really makes sense. I think that's a kind of a great way to go. And at the same time, you still have a platform that is just all knob based, and you can tweak knobs as you go. And if you need to, you can go to your smartphone with the Bluetooth and play around with the editing if you need to on a touchscreen that way. Now, here's the bad news. The price. The ME90 comes in at $379 with the power supply. They sell it without the power supply, which I can't figure that out, at a lower price, but it can run off batteries like the other ones. But I figure if anybody's going to buy it, you're going to buy it with the power supply, so you have that, because batteries always crap out when you need them to not be crapping out. So at $379 with power supply, there you go. The Bluetooth adapter though is not included, and it comes in at around $59, meaning the total for that package now comes in total at around $438. And right now, at the time of this video, the ME80 is still available for $299 new. ME70s can be found used for about $150-ish, and the ME50s can be found for about $120. Now, all in all, for a player that just might want some simple effects, not need all the amp sounds and things like that, an ME50 is still a good choice. It's small, easy to use overall. And that would pair nicely with a really decent sounding combo amp. The ME70 is the next step up with the added preamp sounds and the expanded effects. And then again, if you want to go into extra tweakability and editing, the ME70 is obviously the way to go with that, because they're kind of close to each other with that. And the ME90 is that bigger leap because of that 9-year gap between those ME series, and it's not that surprising. But when you start getting into this price now, it's only competition at that price is starting to get into that Line 6 Pod Go area. And it's kind of got the same features in that thing. And the only thing is, for all that full functionality and for all those available accessories really needed, you're getting kind of close to what Boss offers up now with the Boss GT100, which is still not a slouch. It may not, but consider this a heads up though, because with the release of the ME90, Boss could be retiring the GT100 and the ME80 at some point in the future, as those units are kind of starting to cover a lot of the same territory, and those could very easily be one of those things where a player would be like, well, why am I going to get the ME90 when I can get the GT100, which has a little bit more flexibility, has a screen that's I can work off of a screen, and there's some other outputs and some other things you can play with. Yeah, the ME90 is starting to get a little bit closer to it, and if those are still available, it might bleed some players off from that new product, and that's something to be considering. If you want those older units like the ME80 and the GT100, you might want to start looking at seeing what your local dealer stock is looking like. Now, back to the beginning. Will I be retiring my ME70 and jumping on the ME90 bandwagon? Well, probably not yet. I'm still finding my ME70 useful, and I haven't hit any roadblocks and missing out on any particular effect or functionality to get what I need done, especially considering I cover a variety of music, everything from The Who, and I've mentioned Dua Lipa. We've got stuff like the Rolling Stones in our set, the Gin Blossoms. Basically anything from from the '60s up till today. I'm not running into any problems of going, oh, I should have to add another pedal, or I need to play around with something, or I have to sacrifice something to get it to work. I haven't hit that problem yet. But I will say a lot of these new features of the ME90 do make sense to me, but I haven't hit total FOMO mode yet. But I actually have some other ME70 related videos coming up soon, so I want to make this video as well. So again, if you subscribe, you're sure not to miss out on them when they come out. And anyway, so I want to kind of touch base on that as far as how I feel about them. I think they're all good units, depends on where you're coming from as a player. I'd say that if you're up for the new hotness, yeah, I think definitely go with the ME90. You won't be slouching. But maybe if you've never played around with a multi-effects device and you kind of don't want to go to a screen-based one, I'd say the ME70 or the ME80 are both really great options for that kind of player as well. And I'm running mine, again, right into the PA system. I'm not running into any amps. It's so much easier just to get it through the monitors. It sounds great. We've been using it for gigs all summer long, and I've got some really great compliments on it. And it's a lot easier to bring one device that I can edit and play with and get all the sounds out of it. And our stage volume is a lot lower, which really helps out as well. So it's been a really great platform to work with in that sense. And so I think they're really great. I think there's a lot of possibilities, and they're not just for me, but for some other players as well. But I'd like to hear from you guys. What do you guys think of the ME series? Do you have one? How are you using it? Plugging into an amp? Are you plugging into a PA system? Are you practicing with it? Are you using it for home recording? Are you already listing it on Reverb.com to get the new ME90 and get that one happening when that's available? Let me know in the space below. I'd love to hear from you guys. Thanks for watching, and I'll see you soon. Take care.